I felt like I must have misheard. After all, before my rebirth, I hadn't spoken to my male god for 3 whole years. Although we were in the same class for 3 years, I suspected he didn't even know my name. Look at me, I didn't do my hair today, I hope you don't mind. Huh? I widened my eyes, looking at the male god's obedient and handsome hair. Good heavens, I thought he had changed his style today. Turns out he was just being lazy. But the male god is handsome no matter what, after all, his face is right there. I felt this whole thing was a bit surreal, so I suddenly poked my sleeping deskmate. Linzai, did you just hear Gu Zicheng speak? Cough, cough, cough. Big sis, I was just sleeping. How would I hear anything? Linzai clutched his chest as if internally injured, raising his eyes to look at me with a resentful expression. I leaned into his ear and whispered, don't you think Gu Zicheng is different today? What's different? He didn't do his hair. Linzai looked at me with a shocked expression. Su Xiaoxiao, you woke me up for just this little thing? I blinked innocently and nodded. Linzai looked like he really wanted to beat me up. Why is Su Xiaoxiao leaning so close to Linyu? Don't they know that boys and girls should keep their distance? So annoying, why isn't she my deskmate? I'll go find the homeroom teacher after class. Gu Zicheng's voice rang in my ears again. I froze for a moment, still maintaining the posture of whispering to Linyu. Mainly because this voice was really too clear, I couldn't convince myself it was an illusion. I secretly glanced at Gu Zicheng from the corner of my eye. He was looking at the test paper, twirling his pen, looking like he was pondering a question. I instinctively moved away from Linyu's ear, subtly pulling my chair outwards. Well, although Linyu is my good sister, boys and girls should still maintain a distance. Linyu gave me an inexplicable glare, then continued to lie down and sleep. I propped my chin up, looking at Gu Zicheng, who was seriously answering questions. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the handsome profile of the young man. The young man's appearance, writing with ease, was full of youthful exuberance. I finally gradually accepted the fact of rebirth. Recalling the past few tens of minutes, it was a bit unbelievable. Even if I didn't want to believe it, I couldn't help but wonder, did I just hear Gu Zicheng's inner thoughts? If I was a staunch materialist before, then now, having experienced rebirth, I suddenly felt that being able to hear other people's inner thoughts wasn't anything strange. It's just that for the rest of this class, I never heard any other strange sounds again. The bell for the end of class rang, and the classroom instantly became lively. It was just the beginning of the senior year, and everyone hadn't fully recovered from the indulgence of summer vacation. My best friend came from another class to find me, leaning against the back door, continuously calling my name. As I walked out, I happened to see Gu Zicheng collecting his things and leaving the classroom. My best friend pulled me aside and said mysteriously, Xiao, do you know? I heard Gu Zicheng and the school beauty are dating. I wasn't surprised, because this had already happened in my previous life. At that time, the school was abuzz with noise, and for several months, it was all about the school beauty and the school heartthrob dating rumors, although they were never seen together until graduation. But everyone tacitly accepted the fact that they were together. Handsome guys and beautiful girls who wouldn't want to see them, I was very calm. My best friend looked at me in surprise. Aren't you angry, Xiao? I was puzzled. What am I angry about? She thumped her chest and stamped her foot, covering her chest as if hating that iron couldn't be made into steel. Your male god has been snatched away. How can you not be anxious at all? I found it a bit funny. Although it was true that I had a crush on the male god, I only admired his looks. I never thought about being with him. We were fundamentally not people from the same world. Instead of spending this time on a relationship destined to be fruitless, it would be better to study hard and retake the Tsinghua University entrance exam. My best friend stared at me with her round, big eyes, looking at me incomprehensibly. I perfunctorily comforted her. All right, we're minors, no dating, okay? The bell for class rang just in time. I hurriedly pushed her back. Hurry up and go to class, otherwise you'll have to swim in the corridor all day again. My best friend was left bewildered by my actions. It wasn't until she had walked about 10 meters that she seemed to react. She turned around and yelled at me. Su Xiaoxiao, you turned 18 last month. I returned to my seat in a joyful mood. Thinking of my best friend's incredulous, silly look just now, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Just as I was about to pull out my chair to sit down, Gu Zicheng suddenly walked up to my side with a book. I froze, seeing that he didn't seem to intend to move. I couldn't help but tentatively ask, Class monitor, are you getting something? Gu Zicheng slightly lowered his eyes, looking at me indifferently, and said, "My seat is inside, I need to go in for class." Huh? I suddenly looked to my side. Sure enough, the desk next to me had become completely unfamiliar. Lin Yu's desk couldn't possibly be that clean. I then looked at Gu Zicheng's original spot. Lin Yu was sitting in the seat, waving goodbye to me with tears in his eyes. I was dumbfounded. Did I really hear his inner thoughts? I dazedly made way for him, making it convenient for him to go in. "Thank you." Gu Zicheng politely said thank you. As he walked in, his shoulder brushed against my body, carrying the faint warmth of a teenager. I sat back in my chair in a daze. That's not right. Gu Zicheng being my desk mate, this didn't happen in my previous life. How come the plot direction isn't right? Wait a minute, will I fail to get into Tsinghua University? As soon as this thought came out, I was scared. I quickly took out yesterday's test paper and looked at it. It's okay, I know all the questions. It seems my knowledge hasn't been plundered. I gently exhaled, unable to resist wiping away non-existent cold sweat from my forehead. Men are all liars. Only the admission letter is real. However, thanks to that little incident, I immediately realized relying on past life experiences is unreliable. People should still hold knowledge in their own hands to feel at ease. I immediately opened the 5-3 and started doing practice problems. She's so cute, clearly doesn't understand but still acts so serious. I really like her. How do I feel like I'm being mocked? I really want Xiao to be my girlfriend. How exactly can I pursue her? Good heavens, are you completely unable to do these problems now? You've been staring and talking about the problem for over half a day. Why haven't you come to ask me? Gu Zicheng's voice was still nagging in my ear. I gripped the pen in my hand with a bit more force. The answer was clearly understood in my mind, yet no matter what, I couldn't put it down on paper. His voice sounded so expectant. How could I bear to disappoint him? Very well, today is another day for this face lover to admit defeat. Class monitor, no matter how I calculate this problem, it's wrong. Could you explain it to me? I feigned a frustrated look, pushing the test paper to the middle of the desk, and asked cautiously. Gu Zicheng's hand, which was solving problems, paused. She came to ask me. She really came to ask me. I must seize this opportunity to perform well. I couldn't help but let out a laugh. How could Gu Zicheng's inner thoughts be so contrary to his outward appearance? Don't say it's quite adorable. What are you laughing at? A hint of confusion appeared on Gu Zicheng's cold and aloof handsome face. His inner thoughts, however, were frantically chattering. Why is she laughing? Is my hairstyle today really that funny? But she looks so beautiful when she smiles. Isn't this the smile of my future wife? I was overjoyed listening to his inner monologue. To avoid him misunderstanding if I couldn't help but laugh again later, I chose to interrupt his chattering in time. It's nothing, I just remembered a joke my best friend told me. Class monitor, please continue. Gu Zicheng's eyes still held confusion. However, he didn't ask further, only lowered his head and began to analyze the problem. I covered my wildly thumping heart. Oh my, this contrast, it's too adorable. He analyzed the problem at an extremely fast pace. Where don't you understand? Here and here I don't know how X was suddenly solved. I vaguely made up questions. He faintly mummed and nodded. Then he started from the beginning of the problem, guiding me through the analysis. I don't know if it's because I automatically put on rose-tinted glasses after being able to hear his inner voice. I always felt that Gu Zicheng's voice when explaining problems was exceptionally gentle. I propped my chin up, seriously staring at his face. The young man's serious look while explaining problems was truly captivating. As expected of the man I fancy, even the way he holds his pen is several times cooler than others. I couldn't control myself and started to swoon again. Clack! Gu Zicheng gently placed his pen on the desk and looked up at me. Is there anything else you don't understand? Ah, I was startled and instantly returned to a normal expression. No, not anymore. Thank you, class monitor, I've learned a lot. I quickly pulled back the test paper. So guilty that I didn't dare to meet his gaze. Oh my God, I didn't hear a single word. I was just busy looking at his face. Oh. But I didn't actually need anyone to explain the problems to me. Although for some reasons over the past few years, my superficial grades have been very poor. But in fact, the things I should learn and the problems I should do, I haven't fallen behind on a single one. If it weren't tea for Gu Zicheng's damn contrasting cuteness that made me dizzy, I wouldn't have to pretend not to understand and then awkwardly ask. Taking a deep breath to calm myself, I picked up my pen. The answer flowed smoothly from the nib. Xiao is really smart. I only said it once and she understood everything. Sai, if she's willing to study hard again, she can definitely get into Tsinghua or Peking University. I must find an opportunity to persuade her well. Gu Zicheng, what kind of obsession do you have with making me study hard again? Can't I just work hard this year and get into Tsinghua or Peking University? I really wanted to grab him by the collar and shout, but I couldn't. Finally, the teacher for this class stepped into the classroom just as the last bell rang for class to start. I reined in my chaotic thoughts, and amidst the teacher's familiar teaching style, I slowly found back some of that high school feeling. This class was the last one in the morning. As soon as the dismissal bell rang, the classmates in the class rushed towards the cafeteria like crazy. Soon, only I and Gu Zicheng were left in the classroom. I was waiting for my best friend to come find me, and then we would go to the snack bar to buy things to eat back in the dorm. As for why Gu Zicheng didn't leave, I didn't know, and I didn't want to ask. After all, it had nothing to do with me. I was killing time by doing practice problems while also paying attention to the movement at the door. As a result, I didn't wait for my best friend, but instead waited for an unexpected person. The campus bell. I raised an eyebrow, instinctively looked towards Gu Zicheng, who was still diligently doing practice problems, and couldn't help but let the corner of my mouth curve into a smile. Well, this is getting interesting. The school beauty stood at the door, looking around for a long time. Seeing that Gu Zicheng had no intention of looking up at all, I couldn't help but tap him for the school beauty. Class monitor, someone's looking for you. Gu Zicheng looked up, and after clearly seeing who it was, his brows immediately furrowed. Why is she haunting me? So annoying. I slightly raised my eyebrows, hearing Gu Zicheng's impatient voice in his heart. This situation seems to be different from the rumors. I meaningfully stroked my chin. No wonder I never saw the two of them together in my previous life, even until graduation. It seems that sometimes, no matter how true rumors sound, they still can't be fully believed. Gu Zicheng simply lowered his head again to continue studying, completely ignoring the school beauty. I watched the school beauty again with a mind to enjoy the show. The school beauty, realizing she was being ignored, was already furious. She simply ran directly into our classroom, walked up to Gu Zicheng's desk, and suddenly slapped it. Gu Zicheng, why are you ignoring me? I was so startled by her slap that I immediately moved half a meter away, afraid that if the two of them started fighting, I'd be collateral damage. Gu Zicheng impatiently put down his pen. I heard a string of elegant Chinese expletives raging in his heart. Something. His tone was extremely cold. Didn't you tell my parents you'd take care of me at school? What are you doing now? The school beauty was so aggrieved she was almost crying. I listened from the side, my gossip fire burning brightly. So the school beauty and Gu Zicheng's parents know each other. That explains it. I was enjoying the gossip when I suddenly noticed Gu Zicheng looking at me. His burning gaze was filled with anxiety. What is Shen Liangxin talking about? Won't she make Xiao misunderstand our relationship? But that was my dad's idea. How could I cause trouble for myself? No, I must explain it clearly. If I can't catch my wife because of this, I'll fight her to the death. Gu Zicheng's internal roar almost shattered my eardrums. But then again, hearing him say that made me a little happy. I simply turned my head to look directly into Gu Zicheng's eyes and smiled slightly at him. Gu Zicheng's eyes darkened. Gu Zicheng. Is it because of this woman that you're not having lunch with me? Shen Liangxin suddenly shrieked in a sharp voice. Presumably, she was provoked by our exchanging glances. I immediately lowered my eyes, looking at my nose, then my heart. Whoever causes romantic debts should solve them themselves. Gu Zicheng's voice had lost all patience. I won't be with you no matter who I'm with. If you're not happy, go find whoever said they'd take care of you. You! Tesk, the school beauty, was almost driven mad by anger. Don't you dare laugh, just being Gu Zicheng's deskmate, do you really think he'd fancy you? Shen Liangxin suddenly said to me fiercely. Me? Huh, what? I laughed. Good heavens, I got too engrossed in the gossip and couldn't control myself. I awkwardly touched my nose, then simply smiled good-naturedly at her. Excuse me, classmate. I also think classmate Gu probably wouldn't fancy me. Shen Liangxin's expression softened a bit. Gu Zicheng's expression, however, worsened. I ignored it all. With my eyes curved into a smile, I chuckled softly. His heart should only be for studying. I heard laughter coming from beside me. Instinctively, I turned my head. The handsome young man's face was made even more lively by the smile. I was utterly stunned. Help! Is it really reasonable for someone to be this beautiful? The campus belle had already been angered to the point of leaving. Gu Zicheng, however, looked like he could keep laughing for another 10 years. I casually picked up the math book that the campus belle had deliberately knocked to the ground and couldn't help but mutter under my breath, "No class." Indeed. Gu Zicheng suddenly spoke, his voice still carrying lingering amusement. "Su Xiaoxiao, thank you just now." He spoke very sincerely. I shrugged, joking, "No problem, consider it thanks for helping me with the problem today." After all, she had been passive-aggressive towards me first. I was just returning the favor. I wasn't going to be a big pushover. However, when Gu Zicheng heard what I said, his eyes suddenly lit up. "That's right, tutoring. Why didn't I think of it sooner? As long as I can tutor her one-on-one, cultivating feelings will be a breeze, won't it?" "All right, that's what I'll do." This was Gu Zicheng's inner plan. "How about I tutor you? After all, you were innocently implicated today, so I feel a bit uneasy." This was Gu Zicheng's sincere explanation. Hearing both voices almost simultaneously, good heavens, just with that face, I really couldn't bring myself to refuse. Just like that, I vaguely and confusedly became bound to Gu Zicheng for a tutoring relationship. Over the next month, I fully experienced the charm of contrasting cuteness. Gu Zicheng appeared cool and aloof on the surface, and when discussing problems, he was even more clear-headed, unhurried, and calm. However, his inner self would instantly become uncontrollably excited because of a glance from me or an unintentional brush. I increasingly felt that I might not be a simple face lover. I really can't control myself, boo-hoo. Days passed by, and soon it was time for the first monthly exam. The day before the exam, my best friend finally found an opportunity to pull me aside alone. "You, Su Xiaoxiao, didn't you say no dating before adulthood? What's going on with you now?" She stood with her hands on her hips, her eyes wide as she questioned me. I said amusingly, "No dating, I'm tutoring." "Tutoring? The whole school is spreading rumors that you're dating the school belle, and it turns out you're just tutoring?" My best friend shrieked in disbelief. I quickly covered her mouth. "Oh, ancestor, please speak softly." Speaking of this, I was also very annoyed. Because there was no tutoring in my previous life, I hadn't experienced the power of rumors. But this time, I thoroughly understood. Rumors stop at the wise. I will never believe in gossip again, boo-hoo. My best friend still seemed to have a belly full of questions for me, but I was already afraid that this ancestor would speak without thinking. I quickly thought of a way to get rid of her. I endured the various scrutinizing gazes around me and calmly returned to my seat. Solve problems, solve problems. In my heart, there was only studying. The monthly exam concluded after 2 intense days of testing. The senior year teachers seemed to need no rest when grading papers. In just one short day, all the monthly exam results and rankings were released. I naturally became the focus of everyone's attention again. After all, outsiders didn't know, but classmates in the same class had clearly watched Gu Zicheng explain problems to me for a month. If I didn't do well, it would be a slap in Gu Zicheng's face, although it was impossible for me to do poorly. This time, I calculated my own scores and steadily kept my results within the top 20 of the class. But this was already enough to shock many people. After all, I was usually at the bottom. Gu Zicheng was clearly also very surprised, his face beaming with delight as he looked at me. Maintain this progress, and getting into the top 10 for the final exam shouldn't be a problem. I originally didn't think much of this result. However, seeing Gu Zicheng looking happier than if he had ranked first himself, I really couldn't hold back and smiled brightly at him. Definitely. I guarantee I won't let teacher Gu lose face. Then, I heard the sound of fireworks exploding in Gu Zicheng's heart. After the monthly exam came the National Day holiday, and I had no choice but to start facing the problem I had been avoiding ever since I was reborn. That was going home. On the day of the school closure, my best friend worriedly pulled me. Zio, why don't you just come back with me? My parents still miss you a lot." I looked at her face, which was even more troubled than mine, feeling warmth yet also a sense of oppression inside. But I still gently refused her. "It's okay, it's only 7 days. At worst, I'll just stay in my room and not come out." My best friend looked at me with great unease. but there was nothing she could do. In the end, she could only drag her luggage and reluctantly get into the car that had come to pick her up. I watched her leave and then let out a sigh of relief. Dragging my luggage, I walked to the public transport station and skillfully took the bus home. My house was in the city's famous wealthy district, but if it weren't absolutely necessary, I really didn't want to step foot in this place at all. After much effort, I dragged my luggage home, and as soon as I opened the door, I saw the two people I least wanted to see: my stepmother and stepsister. If a person is truly unlucky, no matter how much they plan their time, they can't escape the jinxes. I resignedly sighed. Ignoring them, I dragged my suitcase and prepared to go upstairs. Oh, whose young miss is this, so ill-mannered? Seeing her elders and sister, she doesn't even greet them. Tusk, 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 this bastard child, truly different. Familiar sarcastic remarks came from behind. Even the words were exactly the same as in my memory. I directly rolled my eyes. In my previous life, I spent almost the entire National Day holiday clashing with my stepmother and stepsister. Aside from gaining a belly full of grievances and embarrassment, it was utterly useless. In this life, I was too lazy to argue with them again. Ignoring their shouts, I went straight back to my room. This godlike perspective was unexpectedly satisfying. I could even know what their next sentence would be in advance. Wasn't that like watching idiots? Thinking this way, the mood of going home didn't seem so annoying anymore. I sat down at my desk and took out my exam papers. I decided that the next 7 days would be spent immersed in the ocean of knowledge. However, it was only the next day. While I was walking back to my room after showering in the evening, I suddenly received a message from Gu Zicheng. He asked me if I wanted to go on a beach vacation for the remaining few days. I admit that at this moment, my heart was moved. After all, no one could refuse beaches and handsome guys, especially after a month of getting along. It seemed I really did like Gu Zicheng a bit more. Perhaps. It wasn't impossible to try to take things further. I thought about it and couldn't help but curve my lips into a smile. But as soon as I opened my room door, the smile on my lips immediately froze. There was a strong smell of burning in my room. In the center of the room, countless burnt and scattered exam papers and homework lay in disarray on the floor. Amidst this pile of ashes, several bright red large characters stood out particularly. Bastard child, illegitimate child, bitch. I didn't need to look to know whose masterpiece it was. However, these words, which I usually heard so often, at this moment suddenly turned into sharp blades shooting straight at me. I couldn't help but give a bitter smile, because I could hear Gu Zicheng's inner voice because I knew he liked me. I had forgotten. The reason I initially chose to secretly love him and not approach him, wasn't it because our statuses were as different as heaven and earth? I never looked down on myself. Yet, in the not-so-friendly process of growing up, I deeply understood that some disparities are determined from birth. I quietly walked into the room, skillfully cleaning up the mess on the floor. Then I took out my phone and politely yet distantly replied to Gu Zicheng's message. I have something to do, so I won't go. Next time, if there's a chance, we can be together. After pressing send, I tossed my phone aside and quietly stared blankly out the window. In my previous life, after graduation, Gu Zicheng went to a top 1 university abroad. That was no surprise. In this life, our fate, at most, would probably stop there. For the next few days, besides eating, I didn't step out of my room. My stepsister repeatedly tried to show off her masterpiece, but I rolled my eyes and pushed her away. Although I gave up on the possibility of developing a relationship with Gu Zicheng, that doesn't mean I've forgiven these people's actions. A gentleman's revenge, 10 years is not too late. Who wins and who loses, let's wait and see. October 6th was my mother's death anniversary. However, this time something completely different happened, something that would affect my entire life. The night before my mother's death anniversary, my busy father finally returned to the house, but what he brought back was news that made me feel like I was struck by lightning. Su Xiaoxiao, I'm not renewing the contract for your mother's burial plot. You can go pay your last respects to her tomorrow. After that, I don't know where her ashes will be thrown. I stared wide-eyed in disbelief, screaming in a choked voice. Why? Su Yilin frowned and scolded me coldly. Why are you yelling so ill-mannered? But we've given her, a mistress, a burial for over 10 years. That's enough consideration. What more do you want? Exactly. Dad doesn't earn money easily, and it's all being spent on a dead person. That's too tiring. My stepmother and stepsister continued to chime in, gloating. I was trembling with anger, suppressing my fury. I said coldly, "Give me a reason." Su Yilin's expression was very unpleasant, but he still explained. "A master said your mother's grave clashes with my company's feng shui. Anyway, she's already dead. We can't just ignore the living for the sake of a dead person, can we? If my company goes bankrupt, you won't have a life either, will you?" Su Xiaoxiao, try to understand, Dad. I simply couldn't believe Su Yilin could come up with such a grand excuse. And he wants me to understand him. My mother died because of him. Does he even have a heart? I was so angry my whole body felt cold. I practically wished I could make him go down and atone to my mother right now. However, I couldn't act impulsively, because right now I had no chance of winning at all. As I thought this through, I only felt a deep sense of powerlessness and sorrow. Suddenly, it was as if I lost the strength to argue with them. I took a deep look at Su Yilin, then turned and slammed the door, leaving. This disgusting place, staying for another second, made me sick to my stomach. Outside, it was pouring rain. I had nowhere to go, so I could only find the nearest convenience store to take shelter. As soon as I reached the entrance of the convenience store, I bumped right into Gu Zicheng, who was coming out. We both froze for a moment. Oh my God, why is Su Xiaoxiao here? Is this the legendary Fate? No, why are her eyes so red? Who bullied her? I'm going to go beat him up. Boo-hoo, wife, don't cry. The more you cry, the more my heart aches. What to do, should I wipe her tears? Listening to Gu Zicheng's inner monologue, my upset mood couldn't help but be amused. How could he be so adorable, completely unlike his cool guy exterior? I smiled at him, clearly seeing the deep concern still in his eyes. He thought so much internally, but in the end, he just went back to the counter to buy a pack of tissues and handed them to me to wipe my tears. I softly said, "Thank you." Then, unable to resist, I teased, "Aren't you going to help me wipe it?" Gu Zicheng was startled for a moment, and I watched as his entire earlobe turned red. This discovery made me exclaim, "Oh." Following that was the sound of his inner self frantically spamming, what do I do?" I was once again charmed by the contrast. In the end, I still wiped away my own tears. The two of us stood silently under the eaves, a not too far, not too close distance apart, sheltering from the rain. I could hear Gu Zicheng's inner voice, filled with weariness. I hesitated for a moment, but still took the initiative to bring up the matter of my mother's grave. "Gu Zicheng, I know it's very shameless to say this, but I really have no other way. Could you lend me some money to renew the fee for my mother's grave? I will definitely pay you back later." I felt so ashamed inside that I didn't even dare to look up at him. Things had happened too suddenly, and I simply didn't know what to do. My best friend's family was of ordinary means, and I couldn't find anyone else I could ask. Meeting Gu Zicheng was an accident. But he had unexpectedly become the only person who could help me at this moment. However, the grave fee was not a small expense, even if his family had money if he refused. "Yes." Gu Zicheng answered very readily, without even a moment's consideration. I, however, felt an even heavier sense of guilt. I bit my lip hard, but tears still fell in large, disobedient drops. Gu Zicheng immediately panicked. He even forgot his superficial pretense. He directly synchronized with his inner thoughts and said, don't cry, I can definitely help you. Don't worry." The more he said that, the more guilty I felt. It was as if I was taking advantage of his affection for me. I turned my back, avoiding his concern, until my emotions calmed down before turning back, looking at Gu Zicheng's undisguised sympathetic gaze. I said to him very seriously, "I'll write you an IOU, and when I get into university, I'll earn money to pay you back no matter what." Gu Zicheng at this moment would probably just nod to anything I said. He had used up all the tissues in his hand, and only then did he let out a long sigh. He said, Zio, you don't need to feel pressured. You asked me for this because of your mother. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. No one should criticize a filial girl." Besides, he paused, then suddenly showed me an extremely gentle smile. "Under such circumstances, you are willing to ask me for help. I am very happy, truly." I was startled, feeling as if something had gently tapped my heart. The young man's eyes were pure and flawless. There was only a passionate and bright love. I looked at him, and my heart was no longer under control. It beat faster and faster in my chest. On the last day of the National Day holiday, Gu Zicheng accompanied me to handle the renewal procedures for my mother's grave. I thanked him profusely, truly not knowing what I could do to express my gratitude. However, Gu Zicheng pondered for a long time and then only said to me, "If you are really so grateful to me, why don't you consider repeating a year this year?" Why hasn't this joke passed yet? But Gu Zicheng's expression was very serious. Xiao, I've tutored you for so long, I can feel that you actually have a lot of potential. If you are willing to repeat, getting into Tsinghua or Peking University next year should not be a problem. You absolutely must not give up on yourself because of family reasons. That would be too much of a waste of your talent. How was I supposed to tell him that I actually hadn't given up on myself at all? I just deliberately performed poorly so that my stepmother and stepsister wouldn't bother me. But how do I say these words out loud now? Gu Zicheng seemed afraid that I would feel he was making things difficult for others, so he hurriedly added, "Don't worry. If you have to repeat a year, I will definitely accompany you. I will absolutely not abandon you." Me? Thank you, I'm so touched, what the hell. I reached out and stopped Gu Zicheng's persuasion. Gritting my teeth, I said, "Don't worry, if I work hard this year, I can still get into Tsinghua and Peking University." Gu Zicheng looked like he wanted to speak, but hesitated. I rushed to say another sentence before he could open his mouth. "If I don't get in, then you can accompany me to repeat a year. Is that good enough?" Gu Zicheng immediately fell silent. Even his usually sharp eyebrows and eyes softened. He smiled slightly, his eyes and brows filled with uncontrollable joy. "Good, it's a deal?" I looked at him with an indescribable emotion. Like an idiot, so happy to accompany someone to repeat a year. But truly, so adorable. I couldn't help but smile. Suddenly, a wave of dizziness swept over my brain. I was startled, feeling as if Gu Zicheng in front of me had become blurry. This kind of dizziness lasted only for a blink of an eye before disappearing. When I regained my senses, I found that I had, at some point, grabbed Gu Zicheng's arm. He was looking down at this moment, his eyes a little worried as he looked at me. "What's wrong? Are you feeling unwell?" I was a little flustered. Subconsciously, I shook my head. "Nothing, maybe low blood pressure." I vaguely pulled out an excuse. That feeling just now was a bit strange. I couldn't describe it, nor did I know how to explain it, so I simply brushed it off for now. "Her complexion is so bad." Gu Zicheng's inner voice was filled with worry. "You sit for a bit, wait for me," he said to me. I nodded, sitting to the side, somewhat lost in thought. Those fleeting images just now seemed to vaguely show Gu Zicheng's face. Why would it be him? Speaking of which, why was it that in this rebirth I could specifically hear his inner voice? "Eat something, we'll go to school together in a bit." Gu Zicheng's voice interrupted my thoughts. I looked up and saw his slightly heaving chest and the chocolate and water he handed to me. Clearly, he had just run to buy them. At this moment, I couldn't describe it. It was as if the sweetness of the chocolate hadn't even entered my mouth yet, but it had already enveloped me completely. My chest felt sweet and warm, making me unable to help but soften the corners of my mouth. "Thank you." Taking the chocolate and tearing open the packaging, I broke off a piece and put it in my mouth. So sweet. It was the sweetest chocolate I had ever eaten in this life. After quietly finishing the entire chocolate, Gu Zicheng then softly asked me, "Are you still dizzy?" "Not dizzy, I'm fine now." I stood up, smilingly patted his shoulder. Then, as expected, I heard Gu Zicheng's inner voice excitedly screaming and rolling around. "Su Xiaoxiao, she touched me again." I couldn't help but curve my eyebrows. The hidden accumulation that had been subtly present in my heart since the National Day holiday began completely dissipated. There's less than a year left. In this life, I will definitely be able to change my fate sooner. And Gu Zicheng, our relationship, perhaps it really can change? When going to school, I hitched a ride in Gu Zicheng's car. A global limited edition Rolls-Royce. From the moment I sat in that car, I knew. Today, I was destined to be the center of attention again, but it was Gu Zicheng. From the moment I sat next to him, his inner rambling never stopped. He was worried that this car was too high profile. He was also bothered that I hadn't rested well recently because I was in a bad mood, and he even had to take a moment to be happy that I was willing to sit next to him instead of the passenger seat. His incessant chatter almost made me want to yell, "Shut up," at him. But all in all, the light-hearted and joyful emotion was still greater than the annoyance. So much so that I didn't feel anything was amiss even though people stared at me all the way to the classroom. As soon as I sat down, Lin Yu had already rushed to my side, grabbing my shoulder. I subconsciously glanced at Gu Zicheng, who was sitting in his original seat. Gu Zicheng had resumed his usual distant and indifferent demeanor since entering the school. At this moment, he held several test papers, twirling his pen and pondering the problems. He looked very focused and aloof, if you ignored his inner jealous roar. Hey Su Xiaoxiao, it's only been a few days since we were deskmates. You're not going to ignore me to this extent, are you? Lin Yu slapped my back in dissatisfaction. I was choked a few times by his heavy-handed slap. I quickly pushed his hand away and said, "Talk if you have something to say, don't get handsy." We usually bickered, so Lin Yu wasn't angry. He seemed to have something very urgent. He looked left and right, seeing no one, then suddenly bent down. His entire head came close to my ear, and he said mysteriously, "The school beauty wants to transfer classes." I was stunned for a moment, and before I could speak, I first heard a crisp crack sound. Lin Yu and I simultaneously looked at Gu Zicheng. We saw Gu Zicheng calmly place the pen he had broken in half aside, and then picked up a new one. Receiving our two speechless gazes, he merely said indifferently, "I was a bit too engrossed in my thoughts, sorry." I silently pushed Lin Yu away, for no other reason. I heard Gu Zicheng's heart whimpering. Lin Yu was always carefree and didn't notice the awkward atmosphere between us. He just said in a somewhat anxious whisper, "Oh, Xiao, didn't you reject the school beauty? What do we do now? Who rejected her?" I paused, then said incredulously, "She wouldn't want to transfer to our class, would she? This didn't happen in my previous life. This drastic change in plot made me feel like I hadn't been reborn, but rather transmigrated into a parallel world." Lin Yu nodded with a solemn expression. I was annoyed. Not that I was afraid of her, but how should I put it? It was really annoying. Just as a national expletive was about to escape my lips, a commotion suddenly erupted at the door. A bad premonition suddenly rose in my heart. Turning my head, I just saw the school beauty with her long, flowing hair walking step by step towards me. Lin Yu instinctively retreated. About 2 meters away, I rolled my eyes at him. I extended my hand, using my middle finger to accuse him of his unbrotherly behavior. Lin Yu raised his head, pretending not to see. In that moment, the school beauty had already reached me. She looked down at me, her gaze also glancing at Gu Zicheng beside me. Then, she bent down and came close to my ear. She said in a volume only we two could hear, "Su Xiaoxiao, I already know everything about your family's affairs." I narrowed my eyes, my expression instantly turning cold. After she finished speaking, she stood up, looking at me with arrogance and provocation. I let out a cold laugh, saying without a trace of panic, "So what?" "Ha," she laughed mockingly, "so what? Su Xiaoxiao, I didn't expect you to be such a little. Shen Liangxin, don't go too far." Gu Zicheng suddenly spoke, interrupting Shen Liangxin's words without ceremony. I turned my head to look at him. My eyes still held a lingering wariness. Gu Zicheng was visibly startled when his gaze met mine, but it was only for a fleeting moment. He quickly composed himself. Looking back at Shen Liangxin, his eyes were still sharp and cold. "I don't care how you transferred to this class, or how many connections your father pulled for you, but don't say what shouldn't be said, otherwise your father won't be able to bear the consequences for you." Gu Zicheng's words were a blatant warning. I saw Shen Liangxin's face turn pale. Her previous arrogance vanished without a trace. My heart felt a little like laughing. Gu Zicheng acted like a CEO, however, I couldn't laugh. Even after Shen Liangxin angrily hugged her books and returned to her seat, I still vaguely watched Gu Zicheng. His demeanor just now. Could it be that he already knew everything too? Gu Zicheng slightly furrowed his brows, his gaze deep and profound as he looked at me. My expression was outwardly calm, but in reality, all my attention was focused on his inner voice. Xiaoxiao looked so pale. What did Shen Liangxin say nonsense to her? She seemed to want to say little something just now. Could it be that Xiaoxiao has a weakness that she got a hold of? This Shen Liangxin, No, I need to go back and discuss with my dad to see if we can donate 2 more buildings to the school. The condition would be to transfer Shen Liangxin to Class 1. Coincidentally, with her end-of-term exam results, she wouldn't even need to change exam rooms. We don't have experimental classes. Our class is Class 23. It just so happens to be 2 opposite corners of one building. I almost couldn't maintain my indifferent expression. I was worried. Although I had told him some things about my mother, but I wasn't ready to tell him everything yet. He interrupted Shen Liangxin just now too timely. It made me can't help but suspect that he had investigated me in secret long ago. But who knew he not only wasn't clear, his inner monologue became even more exaggerated. I really couldn't help but laugh when I heard it. I had long forgotten what my initial purpose was, especially when Gu Zicheng seriously took out his phone and started composing a message to his dad. That serious and meticulous look made him seem like he was about to discuss a multi-million-dollar business deal. Wait, it seems like it really is a multi-million-dollar business deal. My apologies, I'm not worthy. What are you laughing at? Gu Zicheng suddenly looked up, worriedly looking at me. Su Xiaoxiao wasn't stimulated too much by Shen Liangxin, was she? How can she be sad one moment and happy the next? No, the building donation must be done immediately. No one can affect our Su Xiaoxiao's chances of getting into Tsinghua and Peking University. I completely couldn't hold it in. Looking at Gu Zicheng's, the heavens are falling, the king is broken expression, tears of laughter streamed from my eyes. Gu Zicheng was bewildered. He held his phone, staring blankly at me, a rare trace of foolishness appearing in his usually intelligent eyes as a top student. Even his inner monologue stopped. How can a top student's thought process be so adorable? I laughed so hard my stomach started cramping. It was so hard to stop laughing, I held my forehead and took 2 deep breaths of oxygen. Embarrassed, I had laughed too wildly, feeling a bit oxygen-deprived. Gu Zicheng's expression was indescribable. He looked as if he was about to call 120 for me immediately, preferably the kind that connects directly to the psychiatric department. After I had calmed my breathing, I looked up at him. I casually wiped away the tears from the corners of my eyes. I smiled slyly at him. Deliberately throwing him a flirtatious wink, I drew out my words dramatically and said, "So this is what it feels like to be a femme fatale, huh?" For the rest of the day, Gu Zicheng did not mention Shen Liangxin again, because he spent the entire day pondering what femme fatale actually meant. He didn't even do any practice problems. I felt a little bit guilty. Delaying the top student studies, what a sin. However, in the following days, I completely lost my playful mood. I noticed that occasionally, some gossip would start appearing around me. They all said that the campus beauty had inadvertently revealed to someone that I had interfered with her relationship with Gu Zicheng. These rumors were vague, yet they made it impossible for me to find any evidence to confront Shen Liangxin. I originally planned to wait and see, but it wasn't until I saw the words, "Homewrecker," written in large, colorful letters on my desk. I knew this matter would not end peacefully. Lowering my eyes, I quietly stood beside my desk. The classroom was eerily silent. Everyone's eyes were focused on me, yet no one dared to discuss it loudly. I considered for a moment, then cast my gaze towards Shen Liangxin. Sure enough, she was sitting in her seat, looking at me with a provocative gaze. I narrowed my eyes slightly. Instead of immediately going to confront her, I picked up my backpack again, turned around and walked out of the classroom. Control room. I must first get the evidence in my hands. I ran all the way, getting to the control room as quickly as possible. As soon as I pushed open the door to the control room, I saw Gu Zicheng standing in front of the monitor with a serious expression, looking at the screen. Hearing the sound of the door opening, he and the teacher in charge of surveillance turned their heads together. Gu Zicheng's expression changed slightly. "It's over, why is Xiaoxiao here so early? I haven't had time to resolve the matter yet." Damn Shen Liangxin, she actually had someone take the surveillance footage. Her actions are really fast. What to do? How can I make Xiaoxiao feel at ease? Gu Zicheng's mind raced with a flurry of anxious thoughts. Yet, as his rapid internal monologue gradually settled, I felt a sense of calm. I don't know why, even though the crucial evidence was lost. But seeing Gu Zicheng at this moment made me feel incredibly at ease. "Class monitor, the teacher is looking for you." I smiled slightly at him, speaking naturally. Gu Zicheng was stunned for a moment. He first lowered his head and said something to the teacher checking the surveillance, then quickly walked out. I walked out of the control room shoulder to shoulder with him. All the way, I was wondering how to open my mouth and inquire. The surveillance temporarily can't show who did the trick, but it's probably Shen Liangxin, 9 times out of 10. Gu Zicheng suddenly spoke, his voice sounding a bit low. "This is my fault. I will take responsibility for resolving it properly. I'm sorry, Xiaoxiao, for making you suffer." His voice was a little weary as he finished speaking. I chuckled softly. Reaching out, I stood on tiptoe and patted his head. Gu Zicheng immediately froze. "It's okay, it's not your fault. Whoever does it is responsible. If Shen Liangxin dares to do it, she must bear the consequences." I trust you'll stand by my side, right? I curved my eyes at him. Gu Zicheng's ears visibly turned red. His usually calm eyes rarely showed a hint of panic. Even his internal monologue became a jumbled mess. Of course, I will definitely stand by your side, he assured me with unusual seriousness. I smiled a little, and along with a still somewhat dazed Gu Zicheng, returned to the classroom. The moment we entered, the classroom fell into a strange silence. Everyone instinctively quieted down, their eyes obscurely following my figure. I saw Shen Liangxin's jealous face. Slightly curving the corners of my lips, I walked directly in front of her. I've already found the surveillance footage. It was you who wrote on my desk. You're talking nonsense. When I arrived, there were already words on your desk. Many people can testify for me. Shen Liangxin stood up agitatedly, looking for affirmation from others in the class. A few classmates indeed helped her testify. But I did see the surveillance footage, I said unhurriedly. Shen Liangxin was furious. You say you saw it and you saw it. If you have the ability, take it out and let everyone see. I let out a cold laugh. Slightly curving my lips, I spoke in a voice everyone could hear. The evidence will definitely be brought out, but before that. Shen Liangxin, don't you feel that I'm inferior to you, and that I completely used underhanded methods to snatch Gu Zicheng away? Then let's have a fair competition today. Since we are students, we won't do anything flashy. If I win against you in the midterm exam, you will apologize in front of the entire school for slandering me. If you win against me, I'll drop out. How about it? I was sure Shen Liangxin wouldn't refuse me, because she was foolish and arrogant. Good. As expected, she agreed very readily. She seemed to want to mock me a couple of times, but I didn't want to listen. Turning around and returning to my seat, I exchanged a glance with Gu Zicheng. Without a word, he lifted my desk and directly swapped it with Shen Liangxin's. After swapping, he even gave her a warning look, making her not dare to protest. Shen Liangxin was so angry her face turned white then red then white. Of course, these were minor matters compared to my declaration of war that day. The words I said to Shen Liangxin during early morning reading spread throughout the entire school as soon as early morning reading ended. Gu Zicheng endured it without speaking in class. When school was dismissed, he pulled me to a hidden corner. Xiao, you were too impulsive. He furrowed his brows, looking at me with a serious expression. But I couldn't be serious at all, because his inner thoughts were already cursing Shen Liangxin into a sieve. I suppressed a laugh and gently reassured him, don't worry, she can't beat me. Although Shen Liangxin's grades had always been able to maintain around the top 20 in her grade, but to get into Tsinghua or Peking University, she was indeed a bit short. However, Gu Zicheng clearly didn't think so, because he was already thinking about where he could buy 108 ways to cheat in style. I found it a bit amusing, but I couldn't tell him too much. I could only quickly change the subject. Speaking of which, is that surveillance footage still possible to retrieve? That surveillance footage had been handled cleanly by Shen Liangxin. Not a single trace was left. The reason I told her I saw the surveillance was just to test her reaction. Her reaction clearly told me that she was indeed the one who did it. Hearing this, Gu Zicheng's expression indeed became a bit helpless. You're really bold, I'm not even sure if it can definitely be retrieved. I shrugged indifferently. It's fine, anyway, everyone can tell I'm just bluffing. These words were also true. After all, someone on the campus forum had already said things like, if Su Xiaoxiao had evidence, she would have directly thrown it out. How could she use such a roundabout method? Although, he was right. If I had evidence, I really wouldn't bother with her. Thinking of this, I couldn't help but feel a little angry again. Xiao is so cute, she looks like a puffed-up pufferfish now. I really want to poke her, I wonder if she'll explode? Me? I choked on my breath, looking at Gu Zicheng with a subtle gaze. Is this person's thought process a bit too unique? Noticing my gaze, Gu Zicheng returned a very sincere and puzzled look. He looked as if he was truly pondering the surveillance issue. Me. Speechless, I suggest he directly apply to the Central Academy of Drama. For a period of time afterward, Shen Liangxin did indeed take a good rest, and I also focused wholeheartedly on reviewing. Temporarily, I had no time to bother with the gossip around me. The midterm exams quickly arrived. After finishing the last subject, English, I basically knew what level I could achieve. Shen Liangxin definitely had nothing to worry about. I wonder if I could surpass Gu Zicheng? I was somewhat looking forward to it. On the day the results came out, everyone was astonished. I ranked second in the grade, with a total score only 5 points lower than Gu Zicheng. This result, not to mention Shen Liangxin, couldn't accept it. Even Gu Zicheng's inner world was overwhelmed with shock. "Impossible! You definitely cheated!" Shen Liangxin shrieked, holding her score report in disbelief. I wasn't angry, only smiled slightly at her. A bet is a bet, student Shen. Shen Liangxin didn't expect to lose so much face in front of her classmates. She was certain I cheated but had no proof. For a moment, shame and anger intertwined, and she actually raised her hand, intending to hit me directly. Gu Zicheng grabbed her wrist, his voice full of danger. "Shen Liangxin, have you made enough of a scene? Gu Zicheng, you're still protecting her now? She's a homewrecker." Bang, I slapped her across the face without a hint of politeness. Shen Liangxin covered her face, looking at me in disbelief. "Shen Liangxin, you've insulted me repeatedly. Do you really think I don't get angry? You dare to keep talking. You say one word, I'll slap you once. Let's see who's more ruthless." I looked at her coldly. I knew the unfinished sentence she was about to say wasn't that I was a homewrecker, but that I was a homewrecker's daughter. The only thing I could never tolerate in this life was others insulting my mother. Shen Liangxin's expression disgusted me, and I didn't want to continue pretending with her. The classmates in the class didn't dare to breathe, only staring intently at our side, enjoying the drama. Shen Liangxin screamed like crazy, "Su Xiaoxiao! Do you think you can still stay in this school after hitting me?" I scoffed, rolling my eyes even wider. Turning my head, I looked at Gu Zicheng and raised my chin. "Donate to the building fund." Gu Zicheng's expression was momentarily confused. However, he quickly nodded firmly, saying without a trace of hesitation, "Donate?" I smiled. As if an infinite strength suddenly surged in my heart, I looked at Shen Liangxin again. "Face reality, Shen Liangxin, even without me, Gu Zicheng would not be with you, because you simply don't deserve him." Shen Liangxin was already driven mad with anger. She glared at me resentfully, but ultimately, under Gu Zicheng's threatening gaze, she dared not continue speaking. "Su Xiaoxiao, you just wait for me." With that, she turned and ran out of the classroom. I rolled my eyes even bigger in disdain. Coward. I originally thought that this matter would temporarily come to a halt here, but I didn't expect that on the same day after school, a video erupted on the campus forum. The video showed Shen Liangxin buying off students from another school to humiliate me. The most impressive thing was that even what they said could be heard exceptionally clearly. The incident quickly escalated, and eventually, the school administration had no choice but to take it seriously. Because of the overly clear footage, Shen Liangxin had no way to defend herself. Moreover, with Gu Zicheng applying pressure, she was ultimately directly expelled. This outcome was a pleasant surprise. Of course, I was very clear that this matter was mainly thanks to Gu Zicheng. At noon, only the two of us were left in the classroom. I couldn't help but ask him, "Where on earth did you get that video?" "It's so impressive." Gu Zicheng looked up at me. His expression was very calm. However, quick, praise me, am I not super handsome? I'm super amazing." On the surface, he said calmly and modestly, "I checked a round of internal and external surveillance cameras, saw these few thugs coming to find Shen Liangxin, and then went to find them and slightly threatened and coaxed them a bit." He omitted the intermediate process, simply explaining. "The recording was done by themselves, afraid that Shen Liangxin would play dirty. It's nothing." He pretended to be very nonchalant, as if it really wasn't a big deal. I was stifling my laughter to the point of going crazy. I could only sincerely give him a thumbs up. If Gu Zicheng had a tail, it would definitely be wagging right now. Suddenly, a series of sounds came from behind. I instinctively turned around and saw Shen Liangxin standing at the door with a blank expression. I immediately reined in my smile and frowned slightly, looking at her. Tusk, it really matched what Gu Zicheng thought the first time he saw her. A persistent ghost. She looked much more haggard. Behind her followed a man in a suit, carrying her school bag and miscellaneous items, looking like a butler. He must have come to accompany her to pack her things for expulsion. But why was she here now? Shen Liangxin walked in and stood in front of me and Gu Zicheng. She ignored my hostile gaze, her deep dark eyes seeming to suppress something, staring intently at Gu Zicheng. She opened her mouth and said, "She's the daughter of a mistress, a bastard child. She's even less worthy of standing by your side than I am." My eyes instantly turned cold, but I didn't say anything. My background being unexpectedly exposed in front of Gu Zicheng, I instinctively wanted to deny and avoid it. However, a voice in my heart kept telling me to wait, to hear what Gu Zicheng's reaction would be, but his heart was completely calm, even calmer than usual. On his face, he looked at Shen Liangxin indifferently and said coldly, "So?" Shen Liangxin bit her lip instantly. She said agitatedly, "Her mother interfered in other people's relationships. The blood of a third party flows in her veins. A woman like her is just coveting your family's money and power. You will be harmed by her sooner or later." Gu Zicheng frowned slightly. My heart suddenly skipped a beat. "So what does that have to do with you?" Gu Zicheng's voice was already full of impatience. "Whether she covets my family's power or my family's money or just covets me as a useful tool, it doesn't matter. Whatever she wants, she can take it. Anyway, I am willing to give her anything. What are you to presume to meddle in our affairs?" Gu Zicheng didn't even leave her a shred of dignity. Shen Liangxin couldn't believe it, and finally, with a face full of embarrassment, she left without looking back. I faced Gu Zicheng, my head bowed, hiding my trembling hands. I had fantasized many times about Gu Zicheng's reaction after knowing my background. Understanding, calm, disgust, but never such straightforward and firm choice. My heart trembled, yet I suddenly lost the courage to look up and face him. "Xiao Xiao, Xiao Xiao." Two voices from Gu Zicheng called me simultaneously. I instinctively bit my upper lip, still not daring to look up at him. I only heard his extremely gentle voice. What I just said was actually half true and half false. The truth is that I am indeed willing to give you anything, as long as I have it, as long as you want it. The false part is that I don't think you ray after anything of mine. After all, you are a kind and gentle girl. I don't believe what others say, I only believe what I see in you. So lift your head and look at me, okay? His fingertips gently stroked my cheek. I finally looked up, gazing at this man who had completely entered my heart. I thought. I ultimately had no way to push him away again. After that day, my relationship with Gu Zicheng seemed to have suddenly undergone a qualitative leap. We started to resemble a couple more and more. Even the classmates around us thought we were officially together. Even the teachers subtly hinted that our dating shouldn't affect our studies. But only we ourselves knew. In fact, we weren't together at all. The reason was me. I still couldn't move on from my original family so quickly. After all, my father, stepmother, and stepsister were right there. In the same city as me, it was possible to run into them at any turn. I didn't want Gu Zicheng to get mixed up in all that messy stuff. At least wait until university. Once I go to university and leave this place, I think I can truly begin a brand new life. And Gu Zicheng was very considerate, never pressuring me once. He understood my concerns deeply. I was touched by this consideration and happy to have this understanding. Now I no longer wanted to refuse him. I wanted to try harder, to strive to become the person who could stand proudly by his side as soon as possible. The first semester of senior year concluded amidst intense final exams. Gu Zicheng successfully secured a recommendation spot for Tsinghua University. He could even skip school next semester, directly making all the senior year classmates envious to tears. As for me, this time in the finals, I only wanted to beat Gu Zicheng by 1 point and rank first in the grade. This would have an even greater impact than Gu Zicheng getting the recommendation spot. However, the end of the finals meant winter break. The classmates were buzzing with discussions, but it had nothing to do with me. Gu Zicheng simply invited me to his house for the winter break. And thinking about my stepsister immediately calling to scold me after the results came out, I readily agreed. Of course, it was also because Gu Zicheng said his parents were both abroad and hadn't returned that I felt at ease. Who would have thought that as soon as I agreed? He immediately thought to himself, "I'll call them too later. If they want a daughter-in-law, they shouldn't come back this year." My mouth slightly agape. What? This really is their biological son. During the winter break, I moved directly into Gu Zicheng's house. His house was indeed in the same wealthy neighborhood where my house was located. It was just 1 street away from my house and in the opposite direction. Moreover, the security here was usually very strict, so we had never seen each other. Although we inexplicably became housemates, our way of getting along could truly be called a model for our current relationship. Every day, apart from mealtimes, most of our time was spent on studying. Yes, that's right, studying. Although Gu Zicheng had been recommended for admission, I hadn't. People who haven't been recommended for admission don't deserve a relaxing holiday. My mind was only on doing practice problems. Gu Zicheng finally didn't want me to go back to school this time. He had asked me why I deliberately performed poorly before. I frankly told him it was because I didn't want to be troubled by my stepmother and stepsister. When Gu Zicheng heard me say this, his eyes and heart were filled with distress. I felt comforted and gradually no longer resisted mentioning my family to him. On New Year's Eve, he gave me a gift. It was a painting he had drawn himself. The painting showed two small figures happily setting off fireworks together. Behind them was a brightly lit house. I looked at the painting, listened to Gu Zicheng's unspoken confession, and for the first time, I actively hugged him. After New Year's Eve, I originally thought I would continue to live out this senior year so plainly yet happily, but then I suddenly received a phone call. Perhaps it was the butterfly effect brought about by too many changes in this life. The caller was actually my maternal grandfather, who had emigrated abroad after my mother's death. In my previous life, until I was reborn, I had never had any contact with him again. Receiving his call so suddenly in this life made my heart inexplicably tense. When I answered the phone, what he said shocked me speechless. My maternal grandfather had returned this time to seek justice for my mother's wrongful death. He told me he needed me to provide some details and asked me to find a time to meet. After hanging up the phone, I felt a bit dazed. Because the call was on speakerphone, Gu Zicheng knew the entire situation. He looked at me worriedly and said, "I'll go with you." I nodded, instinctively gripping his hand tightly. At that moment, Gu Zicheng's presence became the only strength supporting me from falling. I went to meet my maternal grandfather at the agreed time. He looked much older than the last time I saw him. When he saw Gu Zicheng and me come together, he didn't say anything. Only the lawyer accompanying him asked me some questions, which I answered seriously one by one. It wasn't until the main business was concluded that I finally learned the truth of what happened that year. My mother was not the third party. On the contrary, her encounter with my father was, from beginning to end, a setup orchestrated by my father and my stepmother. I quietly listened to my grandfather tell me the whole truth. The emotions in my heart could not calm down for a long time. I didn't know how I said goodbye to my grandfather or how I returned home. I only knew that Gu Zicheng was by my side the whole time, holding my hand tightly without letting go. Gu Zicheng, my mother didn't interfere in other people's relationships. She wasn't a mistress. Yes, she wasn't. She was deceived. It was Su Yilin and Wei Yun's conspiracy. They wanted to trick my grandfather out of his company shares. My mother was clean from beginning to end. She didn't wrong anyone. Yes, she didn't wrong anyone, and neither did you. You are both clean and kind people. I finally couldn't hold back my emotions, gripping Gu Zicheng's arm and breaking down in tears. But why did such a clean person bear a lifetime of infamy? She died without ever shaking off the label of mistress. She was even murdered. Wei Yun pushed her down the stairs. She killed my mother. Gu Zicheng, I want them to pay the price. I must make them pay the price. Gu Zicheng pulled me into his embrace with one arm. The boy's burning body temperature and strong heartbeat made my emotions calm down slightly. I sobbed, then suddenly felt a drop of water on my face. I was very shocked and wanted to look up, but Gu Zicheng held me down tightly. The 18-year-old boy shed tears for me. He said, "Don't worry, they will definitely pay the price for their actions." After that day, I began to cooperate with my grandfather to file a lawsuit and gather evidence. Gu Zicheng even called his parents directly and told them everything. I originally wanted to stop him. After all, this was my own family matter. However, Gu Zicheng's attitude was very firm, and after his parents heard about it, they even bought plane tickets and returned to the country overnight. I was extremely nervous when I saw his parents. There was always a strange feeling of things not being in the right order, but Gu Zicheng's parents were very natural. His mother saw me and immediately hugged me with heartache. "You've been wronged at such a young age, don't worry, we will help you with what happens next." Gu Zicheng's father was a bit more serious. He looked at me seriously and said, "Su Yilin's company has many problems, this time he won't get away unscathed." I was so touched I didn't know what to say. I could only repeatedly and solemnly express my gratitude. Gu Zicheng's mother smiled again. "Thank you for what? We are all family. Gu Zicheng has talked about you for so many years, we can't let you run away this time." Me? I looked at Gu Zicheng in confusion. So many years? Isn't it at most 2 years of high school? However, Gu Zicheng just touched his nose, stopping his mother from continuing. He smiled slightly at me and said, "I'll tell you about this later when there's a chance." Although I was curious, I nodded in agreement. With the participation of the Gu family, the progress of this matter suddenly accelerated significantly. Su Yilin's company annually failed to pay social insurance for its employees, and moreover, was involved in serious tax evasion and fraud. After this matter was exposed, Su Yilin's company was thoroughly investigated, and in the end, it was unexpectedly discovered that his company was suspected of being involved in money laundering. Su Yilin was directly arrested for financial crimes. Without his protection, Wei Yun's suspected involvement in the accidental homicide could no longer be concealed. In just 2 short months, the Su family went from glory to decline. Su Yilin and Wei Yun were arrested, and the stepsister also transformed from a little princess, pampered in the palm of their hands, into an unsupervised minor. Ultimately, she had no choice but to be taken in by the state, receiving subsidies, until she reached the age of 18. In short, she could no longer live the extravagant life of the past. On the day the court verdict was announced, the sunlight was exceptionally good. I looked at the verdict, sparkling brightly under the sunlight, and felt a lightness in my heart I had never experienced before. Gu Zicheng stood beside me, as silent and gentle as ever. I turned to look at him, revealing the most genuine smile I had shown in these 2 months. "Thank you. Thank you for unconditionally trusting me. Thank you for having your parents help me. Thank you for always being with me. I don't know what blessings I cultivated in my previous life to have such a destiny with Gu Zicheng in this reborn life." Gu Zicheng's brows curved, smiling extremely gently. "Xiao Xiao, after the college entrance examination, I have something I want to tell you." My heart inexplicably skipped a beat. Blood flowed rapidly, and I felt the temperature of my cheeks gradually rise. Flustered, I lowered my head and softly responded, "Okay." As for what he wanted to say, we both knew it implicitly but tacitly kept it a secret. With only 1 month left until the college entrance examination, I simply didn't return to school, letting Gu Zicheng help me consolidate at home. On the day the college entrance examination ended, when I finished the last word of the answer, I knew Tsinghua was a sure thing. Thinking of what Gu Zicheng wanted to tell me after the college entrance examination, I couldn't control my shyness and excitement. Impatiently walking out of the examination hall, I immediately spotted the tall and outstanding Gu Zicheng standing in the crowd. He also saw me and gave me a charming smile. Just as I raised my hand to wave at him, I suddenly felt a dizzying sensation. Before my consciousness disappeared, I only saw the azure sky seemingly forming a whirlpool, wanting to swallow me whole. I woke up, but I felt as if I hadn't woken up, because I suddenly discovered that I seemed not to be a person but had transformed into a soul body. This discovery made my first reaction to close my eyes and sleep. I definitely haven't woken up yet. However, the feeling of my body being too light and ethereal, combined with my clear consciousness, forced me to face reality. I looked at my translucent body and couldn't help but complain. Good heavens, am I dead again? Or am I going to be reborn again? Can't they just let me get into Tsinghua University? I was so angry I didn't know who to vent it on. I was incredibly frustrated. After grumbling for a long time, I finally resigned myself to looking around. This glance nearly scared the wits out of me. How am I in a graveyard? Am I dead? Thinking of this possibility, I hurriedly went to look for my own grave. However, from a distance, I saw a familiar man sitting in front of my grave. Gu Zicheng. The person I had been deliberately avoiding recalling since I became like this suddenly appeared before me. My mood instantly became heavy, but only when I got closer did I realize. This Gu Zicheng looked somewhat more mature. I frowned slightly, and a bold idea suddenly popped into my mind. Could it be that the place I am in now is my previous life? But why would Gu Zicheng from my previous life be in front of my grave? Didn't he go abroad to study? Moreover, I remember we didn't have any interactions in our previous life. Your father's company was brought down by me, and your stepmother and stepsister have also been arrested. It took a bit long, but all in all, it can be considered revenge for you. Oh right, you still don't know, do you? Your mother wasn't a third party and she didn't commit suicide due to depression. She was pushed down the stairs by your stepmother and fell to her death. Just like what your stepsister did to you. I was shocked. My vision suddenly blurred, and memories of my previous life instantly flooded back. I remembered how I died in my previous life. In my previous life, I had always secretly hidden the fact that I studied very well until the college entrance examination when I finally took it seriously. Then I received the admission letter from Tsinghua University. Originally, after the college entrance examination, I should have left that family. However, my stepsister, somehow knowing that I had been admitted to Tsinghua University, actually blocked my room door and waited for me. She mocked me as usual, and I had a fierce argument with her. I don't remember the specific content very clearly, but her outstretched hands and malicious, gleeful eyes at the end, I could never forget them no matter what. My mood was a bit complicated as I remembered everything. Gu Zicheng was still sitting there, muttering expressionlessly. Xiao, I'm sorry. I found out too late. His voice was full of apology. I could hear the intense self-reproach in his words. Hey, it's not your fault. How could it be your fault? I squatted face to face with him. Although I knew he couldn't hear me, I still couldn't help but want to comfort him. You might have forgotten, but you accompanied me through the darkest period of my childhood. I've always remembered you. Huh, there was such a thing? He and I met when we were children? How come I have no impression at all? At that time, my family's business ran into serious problems. My parents were afraid of implicating me, so they sent me to my grandmother's house to stay temporarily. I was young then, and I only felt fear and helplessness about the situation. I matured a bit earlier than my peers, but I wasn't mature enough to see through things. I was stuck in a rut, feeling like life had lost all hope. At that time, I didn't want to worry my family, so I often went to the lake near my grandmother's house by myself. One time, I almost fell in, and it was you who pulled me back. It seems like there was such a thing. I vaguely had some impression, but I didn't know if it was because I had become a soul. My memory wasn't that clear. I quietly listened to him continue. After that day, you came to talk to me every day, chattering away. Even if I ignored you, you could still keep talking. At that time, I wondered how someone like you could exist. If you put it in today's terms, you're like a social powerhouse, completely immune to embarrassment. Until my family overcame the crisis, and my parents came to pick me up. The last time I saw you, you told me to be careful by the lake in the future. After all, if a beautiful person like me died, you would be very, very sad. After all, handsome guys are so rare, one less means one less. Me? Good heavens, it really is me. I covered my face, not daring to look at Gu Zicheng. Even if I don't remember, I can't deny it. That really is something I would say during that period. You were so noisy that I couldn't even think about life. But now looking back, it was largely thanks to you that I didn't get stuck in a dead end and couldn't extricate myself. Later, when I met you again in high school, I was truly surprised. But I didn't dare to tell you, because you seemed to have completely forgotten me. I even once thought, did I grow up ugly, which is why you had absolutely no interest in me? Me, heaven and earth bear witness. Gu Zicheng definitely did not grow up ugly. I just became more reserved after growing up. I only secretly admired handsome guys. But even if you forgot me, I still couldn't help but keep paying attention to you. You've changed a lot since childhood, yet it's as if nothing has changed. His tone was very gentle. Although there was only a tombstone in front of him, I seemed to see my own reflection in his eyes. Xiao, they don't understand why I suddenly liked you so much, even rushing back from abroad and frantically seeking revenge for you. His topic suddenly shifted, making me a bit confused. But it's not sudden at all. I've always liked you. From the first time you pulled me to every day we met again later, I've been liking you. It's just that I was timid and self-conscious. Because I was afraid of your rejection, afraid of your unfamiliar gaze, I often pretended not to know you. Because I thought you were too good, I felt I shouldn't bother you. He suddenly let out a long sigh. From beginning to end, his tone was always so calm and gentle. It was as if he was talking about trivial small talk, yet it made my heart feel sour and swollen. Xiao, I regret it. You clearly pulled me back when I was about to fall into the water, but I didn't hold on to you when you rolled down the stairs. That's why people don't understand why I'm so persistent about you. But if a person has seen the sun, how can they bear to have only light? I watched his curved lips, and tears silently streamed down. I was too weak. If I could do it again, I would let you hear my true feelings. I would lay myself bare before you, whether you accept me or mock me, come closer to me or stay away from me, it would all be your choice. Only no matter what, I would never let you face these things alone again. Xiao, if we could do it again, I would hold on to you, even if it's just to be classmates. I squatted on the ground, watching Gu Zicheng's tall and straight figure disappear into the cemetery. I didn't know what I should do now. After hearing so much from Gu Zicheng just now, I only felt my mood become heavy and bitter. Souls have no tears. I couldn't cry, nor did I know how to respond to him. It was just heartache and sorrow. After silently squatting for a long time to sort out my emotions, I still decided to follow Gu Zicheng and observe for a while first. Gathering my spirits, I chased after him, happily following him back home. Then I was almost scared into immediate reincarnation. How to put it? His house was exactly the same as the Gu Zicheng's house I had lived in during my new life, but Gu Zicheng's room was arranged. If I didn't know better, I would have thought he had shaved his head and become a monk. I tried it and found that these flashy things had no effect on me, so I calmly and steadily flew into Gu Zicheng's room and stayed there. Then, in the next month, I went from being dumbfounded to numb. Every day I watched Gu Zicheng kowtow in his room. It wasn't until the 30th day that I finally understood what he was doing. This unlucky child didn't know where he heard it from some charlatan, that as long as he sincerely and devoutly kowtowed for 49 days, he would be able to see me again. When I found out, I really wanted to grab his ear and shout, "Wake up!" However, I couldn't touch him, so naturally I couldn't grab his ear. He also couldn't hear me speak, so naturally he ignored me. I was so angry I wanted to hit the wall, but in the end, I could only helplessly watch him kowtow for 49 days. When I counted on my fingers and the 49th day arrived, I still had a slight expectation in my heart that I might directly materialize, if he could see me then. The first thing I would do is make him re-recite the 24-character socialist core values. What kind of feudal superstition is a good young person of the new era doing? It's truly outrageous. However, the 49th day was almost over, and I was tired from floating around him, but he still couldn't see me. Gu Zicheng was clearly more anxious than me. He paced back and forth in the room, occasionally looking around, his brows furrowed tightly. "Oh, you poor dear, go see a psychologist," I said, reaching out through the void to touch his head. It goes without saying that this kind of thing is all a scam, but let alone a doctor, for these past few tens of days, even his parents hadn't seen him. I even admired how he managed to reassure everyone outside, only to start going crazy once he returned to his room. I sighed, noticing that he suddenly stood still in the room. He seemed to have thought of something and suddenly rushed out the door. I quickly followed him. I found that the direction he wanted to go was actually my cemetery. I immediately understood what he was thinking, but couldn't help but let out a long sigh. Silently following him, I saw him cross the street, preparing to go to the garage. I flew distractedly, and my peripheral vision suddenly caught sight of a little girl. I saw a little girl about 4 or 5 years old who had somehow come to stand in the middle of the road, hugging a ball. And behind her, a speeding large truck was rumbling towards her. My eyes widened, and instinctively I was about to step forward and pull her away. But someone was faster than me. I froze in midair, my hand still maintaining the outstretched posture. I stared blankly as Gu Zicheng pushed the little girl away with one swift motion, and he himself was crushed under the wheels of the large truck. My brain went boom. "No," I gasped, but only fragmented, sparse syllables escaped. My vision began to whiten in waves. I struggled to open my eyes, wanting to see how Gu Zicheng was doing. But then the sky suddenly became so blue that my head spun, and I finally lost consciousness. When I woke up from my dream, I could still hear the piercing screech of a large truck's brakes. I suddenly sat up in bed, gasping for air. My heart was pounding so hard it made it difficult to breathe, and I hadn't even realized where I was. It wasn't until a rustling sound came from within my reach that I suddenly turned my head. 18-year-old Gu Zicheng was leaning by my bedside, his brows tightly furrowed, seemingly struggling to wake up. I felt my heart skip a beat instantly. The regular beeping sound from the equipment beside me made me realize I was in a hospital room. I stared intently at Gu Zicheng until he slowly lifted his head. His dark eyes held an indescribable emotion. My nose immediately stung. Tears began to fall uncontrollably, large drops rolling down. In an instant, Bitterness, dread, fear, joy. All sorts of emotions instantly flooded my entire body, making me tremble all over. I sobbed, yet silently. Xiao, 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 don't be scared, I'm here, I'm right here. Gu Zicheng immediately panicked. He quickly got up and hugged me. His strong arms held me tightly against his chest, as if wanting to merge me into his flesh and blood. I couldn't stop crying, my tears soaking his entire shirt. Gu Zicheng suddenly became clumsy with words. He kept comforting me, but he only repeated those 2 sentences over and over. As he spoke, his voice even became choked up. Xiao, Xiao, I stopped him from continuing to speak. Gu Zicheng, I like you. I've liked you since the first moment I saw you. I want to be with you forever, will you marry me? I looked at him seriously, my eyes filled with stubbornness. Gu Zicheng's gaze shifted from shock to profoundness. I suddenly realized I couldn't hear his inner voice, but it didn't matter. Gu Zicheng wanted to tell me. His feelings, his love, his persistence, I already knew it all. I also made my choice to approach him, to hug him. I no longer needed to hear his inner voice. From now on, my thoughts, his thoughts, we could both tell each other every single word. I finally understood why I could be reborn, why I could suddenly hear Gu Zicheng's inner voice. It was the reunion that Gu Zicheng's almost obsessive persistence had sought in his previous life. No matter what, we would never let each other down again. Gu Zicheng's eyes looked at me deeply. At this moment, we clearly said nothing, yet it was as if we once again possessed the ability to read each other's inner thoughts. Gu Zicheng suddenly stood up. He pulled me, his voice low and gentle. Can you walk? How does your body feel? I tilted my head, smiling obediently. If I can't walk, will you carry me on your back? Yes. He didn't hesitate. I chuckled, then suddenly jumped onto his back. He seemed to have anticipated it, steadily supporting me on his body. Gu Zicheng carried me like that, hurrying outside. Many people along the way cast puzzled glances, but he seemed not to notice. Later, I was really afraid he would run and fall, so I couldn't help but remind him, don't rush, walk slower, the Civil Affairs Bureau is still far from closing. I've been slow for so many years. If I'm slow again, my wife will run away. His tone sounded wronged and dissatisfied. I couldn't help but laugh. A sudden flash of inspiration struck me, and I opened my mouth and said, don't you think we're not yet of legal marriage age? It seems we still can't get married. Gu Zicheng's steps immediately halted. His entire body was like it had turned to stone. I jumped down from his back and, very interested, circled around to his front to observe his expression. This sight was something else. Good heavens, the child was so wronged he was almost crying. I quickly comforted him, saying, it's okay, just wait another 4 years. 4 years, Gu Zicheng was on the verge of collapse. I rubbed my nose, truly not very good at comforting people. Turning my head to look around, I, in a moment of resourcefulness, pulled a blade of green grass from a flower bed. With a flick of my fingers, I fashioned it into a ring, then pulled his left hand over and slipped it onto his ring finger. All right, I've given you the ring. Rounding up, it counts as us being married. Gu Zicheng looked at the green grass ring, a little stunned. He seemed not to have expected that one day he would actually wear something like this on his hand. But I had no other way. He'd better be satisfied quickly. Gu Zicheng suddenly laughed. It was both helpless and a little annoyed. I'm telling you, can't you be a little more reserved? You've done the proposal and the ring giving, what am I supposed to do? Huh, I really hadn't thought that much. Gu Zicheng looked at me, a little helpless. Finally, he still angrily pulled his hand back, holding me with the green grass ring, and kissed me without ceremony. I laughed and embraced him, kissing him. After the kiss, our fingers were intertwined. I held the finger on which he wore the green grass ring and whispered softly into his ear, smiling faintly. A blade of grass for a ring, I give you my whole life. We appreciate you listening to the story at Audio Love Tales. Kindly like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more content.